red lights on, folks. Friday afternoon down here in Honolulu. Ted Ralston, host of Where the Road Leads on ThinkTech Hawaii. And Jay Fidel, who runs the operation here. Jay, just a comment. Red lights mean go in this business. Every place else that I've ever been to, red lights mean stop and green means go. I'm just curious how that worked. Anyway, Where the Road Leads, this episode we're calling The Road Leads to a UAV or a UAS near you. And as you know, folks who've been watching this show, interest in UAVs is very high in Jay's mind, and that's kind of how this whole program evolved. I'll introduce our guests in a minute here, but we've had many discussions at this table on this show about the evolving technology and the regulatory framework for UAVs. And what's astoundingly new is the appearance on the world scene this last Sunday of what's called an NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. That's what it looks like, 200 pages of very well thought through dialogue from the FAA on how they're thinking about going forward in UAVs. So we've got a couple of experts on the line here today. Larry Osborn right here next to me in Honolulu. And we've got Leonard Ligon up in Alaska, representing the University of Alaska as part of the leadership team within the Hawaii, Alaska, Oregon, Iceland UAV test site team. Anyway, we're going to talk about where the expectations we might all have are of what we've seen in this NPRM, what it means to us, and really what the public should think about as this whole process of rulemaking emerges. Where can people get information? How can they contribute to the dialogue and the conversation? And what do we, who are sort of in the middle of this thing, think about it? And if we get boring, as it is not unlikely that might occur, we have Jay Fidel here who will stir the water and stimulate conversation for us.
Excellent.
But first of all, let me just ask Leonard to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what you've done in the past, Leonard, and what you think about this NPRM, again, from the perspective of what people might want to think about as the work progresses.
All right, well, Leonard Ligon, and I've been working in the unmanned aircraft field since 1993, is when I first got involved in it. So I came from a military background, and while in the military, I was, in my last assignment, I got familiar with unmanned aircraft, range management, airspace management, ultimately attended the air traffic courses and airspace management courses with the FAA at the FAA Academy, as well as the Air Force's schools in Biloxi. And then my company saw that there was a need to send me overseas to the International Airspace Managers course in Brussels. Consequently, since then, I have worked on 5 continents doing unmanned aircraft work, from the small handheld, even smaller than you've got right there on the table, to right now part of my time is dedicated to the Navy's Triton unmanned aircraft program, which is the Navy's Global Hawk version. So something with I believe this latest one has a 130-foot wingspan. It's larger than a 727 or 737 in wingspan itself. So I'm working in all realms, all altitudes, categories, classes of airspace. So I'm rounded.
So Leonard, you've got some serious credentials there, and that's fantastic. And let's just ask you the question: given the NPRM that's on the street and the background that you've got, how do you see the rulemaking process emerging? And again, what should the public expect out of this activity, and how are they going to get information about this process as it continues to move forward?
Well, I mean, there's some sadness to some of that, and then I'm glad to see that we're making forward progress here. We're making some movement in the right direction. You know, the FAA has what I like to term as an awesome responsibility. We've got some of the busiest airspace in the world, and we've got a lot of freedoms that the manned aircraft community out there has the ability to exercise. And because of those freedoms, the airspace, every bit of it, from the time you lift off of the ground, is what's considered or called navigable airspace. You know, so that's why I like to call it an awesome responsibility. 90% of the airspace out there is called controlled airspace, but down here in the surface areas where we're going to be talking about is uncontrolled, and consequently, this is an area where Larry, I believe you're a flyer, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
All right, so you understand that an aviator in uncontrolled airspace doesn't need to talk to air traffic control ever if they don't want to. They have you know, minimum restrictions. If you know there's structures on the ground or know there's people on the ground, you have a responsibility to stay either 500 feet or 1,000 feet away from them. But if you don't know they're there, you can go right down there and clip the tops off the trees if you choose to. Helicopters, on the other hand, can set right down pretty much anywhere they want and go down, you know, below hillsides, below the rims of volcanoes or glaciers or whatever. And if there are unmanned aircraft out there that are the size of birds, there's a lot of possible problems that could arise there.
And what we're talking about in this NPRM is the category of UAVs called small UAVs, which are defined as 55 pounds or less. There's not many birds that are 55 pounds. So
Not too many.
A lot of biomass here that's well in excess of any experience that the airplane and helicopter operators have with birds. So this is a whole new dimension for us.
Exactly. Well, the vast majority of hobbyists fly the micro UAVs. So they're down below 4.5 pounds or so.
That's a term that's coming into use now.
Coming into use now, and we can anticipate probably that the FAA will have rules for that category. And those are medium-sized
And this
birds.
here's an example of one right here. This is a 4.5 pounder. So this is what we're talking about, folks. That's going to be in this micro UAV category, even though it's not exactly a microchip.
Exactly. And so, you know, there is a challenge to make sure that these things and aircraft, commercial aircraft, general aviation don't mix. I think keeping them away from airports, keeping them below 400 or 500 feet is going to solve the problem for the commercial aviation community, because they don't operate there. They generally fly well above that. They're in controlled airspace all the time. And as long as you're not in the vicinity of an airport along an approach corridor, this is not going to be a threat to them. On the other hand, general aviation is going to be in the same regime as a lot of these aircraft. And so I'm sure that's, you know, why they're going to, the FAA is going to insist that those that operate these small UAVs are going to have to be tested on their aviation knowledge.
So we're going to have some aeronautical knowledge requirements.
Some aeronautical knowledge, which would include information about airspace, information about maneuvering their aircraft right away.
And about what the other guy's doing, right? The other guy
about what the other guy's
how
doing
he's thinking
and
about
what
this
he's
problem.
thinking about the, you know, the problem. Exactly. So, and initially, as you can see in this document, these are to be operated only within line of sight.
And that sounds like education and training, which our friends at NDPTC right down the street, we're building a program right now on UAV awareness and training. I think the education component here is going to be the sinew that holds all this together.
Exactly.
That's how we're going to cross-communicate all this information so that UAV operators get to understand what fixed wing aviators are thinking about and how that all fits with the air traffic management system.
And most of us here, Leonard included, I think, we're old enough to remember driver's ed.
I'm way older than that.
Older than cars, but if you can remember the driver's education program where you got this in the parking lot in your high school generally. And then you reached a certain level of competence where your insurance was less expensive than if you didn't take the course. So the one thing that we had talked about the FAA not addressing is liability. And I'll contrast that with what Canada did with their small UAV rules, in that they insisted not only that the operator be certified, have a license to operate the vehicle, which is, I think, what the FAA is talking about when they say there's going to be education associated with their ability to operate a UAV. And they'll have to, you know, carry their driver's license, if you will, with them. In Canada, they've also insisted that they have liability insurance, which I think is not a bad idea. And we'll see where that idea goes going forward. Because if you think about a 55-pound vehicle going 100 miles an hour, 87 knots, that's a, as you said, that's a lot of kinetic energy.
You know, and that's a good point on liability. Again, in this NPRM, there's not a mention of it in here that I've been able to find yet,
right.
Going through it once. And as I think about it, in all of our past FAR 91, 25, 91, 33, whatever section of the FARs you look at, there isn't also there a liability issue. So liability in the U.S. must be controlled by other means, not by FAA certification and other requirements. So there will be then some either local or state or some other kind of liability demand.
Yeah, Canada did it at the federal level, and as you said, the FAA doesn't seem to have the interest in doing that.
How do you guys see the liability situation from your perspective in Alaska, Leonard?
It scares the bejabbers out of us that it's not, well, it scares me that it's not addressed here. I've been writing to this document now for the last 2 days, and over and over, I keep going back to define what this means, or liability is going to be the case. I keep looking for definition to things like, oh, I don't know, let me pull one up. Daylight only operations. What does that mean exactly? If it's not defined in the document, and if I'm not a flyer, and I just pick up a UAV and go out and get my just get whatever my UAV pilot's license is, am I going to be taught what that means? Am I going to be guided to the Federal Aviation Regulations that talks about what exactly is official sunrise and sunset? Do they mean nautical? Do they mean twilight? Do they mean act? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I just thought of something as you're saying this, some comments Larry made. And again, the comment about NDPTC right down the street doing a training program. Maybe one of the obligations of all of us who are in this business is to as Leonard's doing, write against this in terms of what things need to be included in an educational or training program.
I think so. We don't see any of that coming out yet.
Right. Let's pick that up and talk about that among the three of us after we take our first break here. Back in about 30 seconds, folks. Ted Ralston in Honolulu with Larry Osborn and Leonard Ligon.
Hi, my name is Andrew Howard. I'm an astronomer at the Institute for Astronomy at the University of Hawaii up in Manoa. I'd like to tell you about the annual open house that we're having this year. It is on April 6th, 11 to 4 p.m. It's an all ages event, kids, grown-ups, even people in between, everyone is welcome. We have a lot of really fun activities. You get to meet astronomers, look at yourself in an infrared camera, play with Legos, make robots, look at videos. You can even make some of the kids like to make comets out of gravel and snow. Even adults like to do that too. You'll be able to look at the sun with a solar camera safely. It's really a great activity. We do this every year in April, and I hope to see you this year. Thanks.
We're back on, folks. Ted Ralston here in downtown Honolulu with Larry Osborn at the table and Leonard Ligon up in Fairbanks, Alaska. In by Skype. We're talking about UAVs, a very commonly heard and popular subject on this program. As you see, we've got one on the table here. This is the recently published FAA Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. 200 pages of text to go through to understand how the FAA is thinking about putting rules on the table that allow UAVs to come to a person near you, such as yourself. And just as a frame of reference here, we're talking just before the break about what content's needed in an educational program to bring people up to a level of competence to operate these. But this category of aircraft here, it's going to be called a micro UAV, 4.5 pounds or smaller, is going to have very, very little regulation. There'll be some regulation on the operator per the NPRM, but very little, if any, regulatory requirements on the aircraft itself in terms of anything, which was a surprise to all of us.
Yeah, that's a surprise too, because...
But if I can finish up,
go ahead.
Then we go all the way up to 55 pounds, where there's going to be even there a relatively modest, if at all, set of requirements. And so we've got I think a lot of us in this game have some concerns about that. And then if you get above 55 pounds, we'll start to sneak into the more regulated domains. But the kind of things that happen here, at least as I see it, is that since the break point is going to be 55 pounds, there's going to be a lot of vehicles designed for 54.9 pounds because the cost to getting to 55.1 pounds is going to be much higher as you go into the certified ranks.
Yeah.
We're going to see a distribution of a lot of equipment showing up at 4.5 pounds, just below that break point. Another whole bunch of equipment showing up at 55 pounds. But what we don't talk about, they don't talk about here in the NPRM, is the cost. Even something like this at 4.5 pounds in a commercially available, very competent system, you're looking at $30,000, $40,000 for a complete system of launching system, electronics, batteries and such. So the 55-pounders, that's a couple of $100,000. That is not insignificant change. And it just strikes me that they're so light in terms of requirements, even at that level of complex equipment. So that's just my reaction, that we have this categorization, and what we got to do is figure out how to put an awareness and an educational program together that captures those real risks and gets people aware of what the consequences might be.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't address reliability of the ground control system or the data link.
Or the whole thing tied together.
The whole system. You know, there should be some measure of that, because if something is 50 pounds going 100 miles an hour, and it has a very fragile link that can be lost, you know, it needs, first of all, needs a pretty robust link and one that's reliable, and it also needs some pre-programmed behavior if that link is lost, so that it's not a threat. And those are the kinds of things I think the FAA should take a look at, to have some minimal requirement to certify the vehicle. If you're looking at a little quad rotor, maybe like a Parrot or something that weighs a couple pounds, doesn't go very fast, there's minimal risk there that can hurt anybody, even if it's out of control.
May land on the White House lawn.
May do that, but there's not a lot of risk there, a lot of exposure. But you know, again, these bigger ones that go fast, they can hurt somebody and they can do some damage, and probably there ought to be some level of reliability testing on the part of the manufacturer to make sure the system is reliable.
I wonder if that isn't a role for the state sites, such as the one we're involved in here in Hawaii.
I think it is. I mean, I see roles for the UAS test sites to be one of their roles among the many things they're going to be asked to do. I think will be to serve as the Department of Motor Vehicles for UAS.
Or the Underwriters Laboratory.
Or well, they'll be both, I think. You're right.
Yes.
So I think they'll be in a role where they're certifying aircraft, certifying operators, giving the test. And then there's an opportunity for a whole new cottage industry to train operators.
You know, another thought, and we need to bring Leonard back in on this, but the insurance companies who are going to have to front the liability insurance for people to use these, they're probably going to have a vote in this game in terms of what the reliability requirements are, just as they do for cars and anything else we have. And in fact, that is something we probably should tease up at some follow-on conversation at this table. How do the insurance companies see this kind of a new issue coming up in terms of the liabilities generated by it? Your thoughts, Leonard? Again, we're going back to the subject of what kind of information do we need to collect to put into an awareness and training program so that the people using these systems can understand what they have to understand, and we can find some way to train them and get them responsible.
I see Larry started down the path there, talking about being kind of a DMV, or Department of Motor Vehicles. I see those types of organizations or offices being established nationwide, wherever they may be. But I see the test sites more as the laboratories that are going to gather the data that substantiates what those tests should be, what those test results should be, how the people are to be certified, or to what level of certitude is required for each, you know, whether it's a rotary wing, whether it's a fixed wing, whether it's something that goes very fast or slow or light or heavy. You know, there's going to be some categorical breakdowns that have to occur here.
Now, notice that we didn't find that in the NPRM. The NPRM did not.
But So the nature of that document is exactly what it's titled is. It's a notice to proposed, and the key word is proposed rulemaking. Now, what the proposed rulemaking does is it sets out a draft, if you will, to the public and says, okay, we need you within, in this case, it was 60 days, which I think is kind of fast, but in 60 days, we need your responses back. And when we get those responses back here at the FAA, what we're going to do is we're going to take the next 12 to 18 to 24 months to digest all of those, rack and stack them, and then at the end of that period, they're going to send it out again for more comments and ask, okay, what still needs to be fixed? So we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there probably for 2 to 3 years. That's what this proposed rulemaking is doing. This is just the first step in a very long trek that's about to happen here.
Yes, and you're, on top of that, once the rules do get established, the FAA has to come up with a training program of its own people in order how to implement those rules and score them and generate internal training programs. So yeah, it's like, I think Jim Williams is telling us maybe 3 years after this issue, which should be 2018, before the rules are real. But the point you're raising is that this is at best a categorical outline, and then our job is, or anybody's job as responders, is to push in information back that gets the final rules adjusted to meet these issues. Normally, we wouldn't be in there asking for reliability requirements. We'd be happy that they're not there. But I think in this case, because it's got the error component to it and it has the potential catastrophic component to it, it's up to us, and it's an obligation we have to think about the liability issue.
And think about the risk that's associated with it. And I'm sure the insurance companies will, because that liability goes right on down to the manufacturers, and I think they'll be big players in certifying their products.
How do you think the manufacturers are going to respond to this document? I'm thinking of the people who make the commonly understood drones these days. We have these systems at the 4.5 pounds. We have the 100,000 pound global haul.
I would have to say that for the manufacturers, the less regulation, the better, and I doubt that they'll be asking for more constraints or more regulation. I wanted to comment on one other thing. As a former aviator, I know every type aircraft I flew, I had to demonstrate competence in flying that type aircraft, even though I was a rated aviator in the Navy. So is that an important part of this? Should we be making sure that the operators not only have some aviation knowledge, but should they demonstrate their competence in some way in operating some standard UAV?
I think the public, over whose heads this stuff might fly, would certainly expect that, wouldn't they?
I would think so. Leonard, I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Well, let's step back one to the insurance question. The insurance industry is data-driven. 100% data-driven, and without facts and without data, they have no other choice but to raise those premiums to a standard that in some cases may not be achievable by individuals or some individuals or small companies, mom and pop kind of companies. To get $1 million liability insurance for a small UAS, where there is no factual data existing in the insurance industry's archives anywhere, to them it's a best guess. Right now, there are several that use Lloyd's of London, and they're the only ones who will insure in some cases.
I noticed there is a study out, and maybe Ted, you're familiar with it. Somebody used birds as an analog for micro UAVs in an attempt to be able to quantify the risk.
Right, quantifying the risk is something you can state, you can provide the mathematics for, you can hire a university or a mathematics department to help you out with that. You can provide that data, but until there is repetitive data, redundant data that allows the insurance industry to feel comfortable with what that data looks like, it's it's going to remain high for the time being.
That's another role the state sites can have. These 6 sites we mentioned is the data generators that look at the consequences and look at the determine reliability measuring means and determine operator quality means. This is in fact what do you think when you realize what we've got here? This is the beginning of a whole new generation of aviation. They're not going to happen all at once. We're looking at the next 50 years of evolution and development here, which is important for the kids in K through 12 who are looking at this show or want to make this part of their career, or those in the university engineering ranks who want to push forward. So this isn't going to happen overnight. But one thing I do appreciate about the FAA's approach here is they are taking it very carefully, incrementally, to make sure that they don't go too far too fast. But once again, I think we all have the obligation to help them make sure they structure it in a way that is representative of the needs that we all see in respect to the public. We'll take one more break here and then come back in 30 seconds and carry on.
We're here with Hunter Haviland because he is a member of our panel on February 26th. We're going to talk about Hawaii, the state of unfunded liabilities. Hi, Hunter.
Hi, Jay.
So what does it look like from your point of view, being on that panel?
Well, part of my work is with the Asia Pacific Center for Regenerative Design. And so with that, we're kind of taking a broader notion of when we talk about liabilities, what are some of the external factors, right? So if we're talking about sustainability across the globe, resilience to natural disasters, our use of natural resources, and how those things do or don't get incorporated into our current understandings of the state of the state.
Yeah, and thus the liabilities and thus the economy. Yeah. So that's February 26th. It's a Thursday. It's at Laniakea. It starts at 12 noon. Come down 11:30 for lunch. Check out our website to sign up, thinktechhawaii.com. Hunter is one of 7 speakers. We'll be trying to talk to some of the others too, let you know what they're going to do. And sign up. We'll see you there. It'll be important. It's one of the most important things we can think of. Aloha.
Aloha.
We're back, folks. Ted Ralston here, host of our show, Where the Road Leads. We're talking about that road leading to a UAV near you. That subject's been discussed on this program many times. We've got superb experts online with us here. We've got Larry Osborn here in the studio in Honolulu, and Leonard Ligon up in Alaska, cogitating on the recently released NPRM and stroking our collective beards as to what we think that we need to do in generating responses. And should we get too boring, we'll bring Jay Fidel in to stir things up. I think that hasn't happened yet. Anyway, we were talking about a lot of different things here, but fundamentally, what should the public think about? Where is the public going to get information from? How can they input to this process? That's a complex issue, and we don't want to have a situation where the public gets surprised as these rules and regulations evolve. But everything we're speaking of here in the world of UAVs affects the public in some big or little way. What's your thoughts on that, Larry? How to get the public involved here, get them stirred up and get them participating?
Well, I think that first what they should do is go to the FAA website and look for the Unmanned section on that website. And they'll be able to find some fact sheets and some overviews that will give them some good information about the rulemaking process and about, very specifically what's going on in unmanned systems.
So they could go to, just if you Google around on NPRM, UAS, FAA, you'll come up with a lot of...
and they can find a whole section on unmanned systems. If they're so moved, they can read the 200-page document, or they can find there's a couple of nice one-page fact sheets that the FAA has put together. They can familiarize themselves with the issues.
But again, the question is, how does the public even know to go on the FAA.gov site and extract that information? I don't know if we can answer the question
here. Well, I don't know if we expect the public at large to do that, but certainly people who are informed and part of this industry, I'm sure, will be participating in the process.
Won't be an issue, like getting the public up.
And there'll be people on all sides. It won't just, of the issue. To include people that are concerned about privacy, safety, as well as industry that are interested in moving the technology forward more quickly than this rulemaking process seems to allow.
I just had an idea. Let's try it on you guys and see what you think of it. We've got a lot of demonstrations here in Hawaii and in the mainland with various professional organizations like the surveyors the environmental people, the beach erosion people. So maybe we all have an obligation to go back to all the organizations we deal with and tell them, this NPRM's out there, it's going to affect your future business or your education, your business, whatever it might be. And to the extent you can, maybe here's what you ought to do in paying attention to it. So maybe we have this social obligation as individuals to go make that happen.
I think so. If you start thinking about all of the proposed applications of this technology, there are few industries that won't be affected by it, particularly as more autonomy is introduced into these systems and smaller aircraft and sensors and more sophisticated sensors are developed. You mentioned surveyors. Think about here in Hawaii when we have a mishap on the roadway. We tend to close that road for a couple hours while people on the ground survey the accident site and do their investigation. Well, that kind of a survey can be done by the air and from the air in just a few minutes, and help accelerate that process and open those highways again and do a better job, probably more precisely measuring the mishap site and mapping out, where skid marks might be, where the path of the vehicle. So I don't want to get into the real specifics, but there are some very, very good things that go along with this technology. Probably one of the ones we should be interested here in Hawaii is precision agriculture, where if you get these small aircraft to survey fields, it's called precision agriculture because then you can very precisely apply fertilizer. You don't over-fertilize and you get it in the right place. The same thing with irrigating your fields. You don't overwater and have more runoff than you need. You just put on what you need where you need it, and the same thing would hold true with any pesticide that gets applied. So it has the potential to increase crop yields in a friendly, environmentally advantageous kind of way.
And to their great credit, the FAA brought that out in their NPRM. They identified half a dozen or a dozen areas where benefits would occur. But going back to the issue of getting the public involved, I mean, so many times we have these things that go forth in some domain of the government and they surprise people when they do come out. And I think we're all surprised by some of what we've seen here.
Sure.
I wonder if we can't stand up our state site function, which is Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, and generate a common communique of some kind and get it out to the newspapers and get it out through the other avenues of government and let people know, hey, this is on the street, not much time. If you have the knowledge, go after it. If you don't, come after us.
All right.
And maybe we can take that as an action, and we'll pass that to Leonard and have him talk to Roe about it. What do you think, Leonard, about taking...
Exactly. Roe and I were talking about this very approach yesterday, and what we proposed was, there's the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, AUVSI. That's the international association that is. They have a huge lobbying effort, and they have a huge political piece that's in Washington D.C. They're going to address this. So if you're a member of AUVSI, feed your information to them because they're going to be gathering this information and feeding it. The 6 test sites around the country are going to be doing the same thing. So any of the manufacturers or industry stakeholders that have aligned themselves with the test sites, I would recommend get with the test sites and find out who is going to be their collaborative nexus for putting this information in. And then there are the manufacturers and the industry stakeholders who are not part of the test site or who may not even be part of AUVSI. There's absolutely no reason to think that these industry stakeholders or manufacturers can't form their own coalition, or even if you had a company, let's just say Google or Amazon or one of them, they're big, they have a lot of power behind them. When they speak with a voice in Washington, it's heard at all levels, from Senate, Congress, all the way down into the FAA. So, were they they were to set up some kind of a response page or site that people could address, and then they could filter it and send it up You're right. There's no end to this. All of the test sites, the centers of excellence, all the stakeholders around the country should be reaching out throughout their community, knowing who's interested, who could be interested. Talk to your public safety. Talk to your Department of Transportation in the state, your Department of Natural Resources. Find out who might be interested. Gather them together, and get as much of this information coalesced, racked and stacked, as I first said, and get ready to submit this before that 60-day clock runs out.
Right, and our task is to take 200 pages of well thought through reasoning with a lot of interplay and complications and cut it down to the back of a business card or something very straightforward. And that would be a great thing for us to take on, Larry, as a larger group.
I'm glad that Leonard mentioned AUVSI, because even though you don't have to be a member to go to the website, and it's a good resource if you want to read up on this technology, to go to and read some of the material that they have on their website.
So we can, again, we can use this program, this opportunity on Fridays at 4 o'clock to keep channeling this information through the state of Hawaii here, and others who might be tuned in from in other locations on streaming video. But it just struck me that we have that obligation, and I really appreciate the fact you thought the same thing, and Leonard's already been thinking about that. We have about 5 more minutes in our...
Ted, if I may, one that I forgot to mention that is going to be key, and they exist everywhere pretty much in the country, is the American Modelers Association. While they are a modelers association, they deal hand in hand with these UAV questions every single day. People come to them and say, how can I do this? How can I make money with this? And of course, being models, they can't do it. But you know what? They have firsthand interest in this, and so they're dealing with this every single day. So that's just another association that is already in every state and in most major cities.
And they've really been the pioneers in creating some of these rules, because they have all this practical experience, years and years of flying radio-controlled aircraft.
Not only the rules, also the technology is mostly emerged out of the model airplane business.
That's right.
And you got to thank them for, I mean, the level of technology in these systems today is so far from what it was when we were kids growing up and had single-channel rubber band powered servos.
Balsa wood and paper and dope.
Yeah, this stuff is one step away from being aerospace quality in terms of reliability and such. But again, the reliability issue, we've got single-string systems. We've got to think about the cyber aspects. We got to think about the DIL, the distributed intermittent, or the disconnected intermittent and limited communication. We got to think about the rebooting cycle when one system goes down. There's so much to think about in this game.
And the good news is that nearly all of these vehicles that are manufactured now have the ability to have firmware where they can accept program behavior. So when they do lose the link or whatever, they can fly in a predictable way. Typically return to the operator and land.
Those of us who've operated these things and flown them also find that there are areas where, because we have single string dependence. GPS, for example, typically you'll have one GPS receiver on here, not 3, and there's no voting between them. And so when you have a GPS failure, you can have some surprising things to deal with very quickly. Things happen fast in this domain that are close to the Earth, and so again, part of the training and education is what do you do when something goes wrong?
Sure.
Anyway, we've come to pretty close to the end of our period of discussion here, folks, and we'll do this again many, many times. And anybody who out there who would like to join our table, please let us know. But before we do depart for the day, I'd like to ask the two of you, and I'll throw my comments in too, about what you'd like to have the public have taken away from this conversation today. What kind of inspired feedback would you like from anybody who's watching this show to get to us? So let's turn to our guest in Alaska. No pressure, Leonard, but...
No. I'm actually glad you asked that question. The main thing to take away from this is that is a proposed rule, and we're getting calls and emails already, dozens of them, asking us, hey, can I go and fly now? And the answer is no, you can't. No, I mean, seriously, we're 18 to up to 36 months away, I believe, from the earliest we're going to see anything that looks like a good rule to come out. But this is a good first step, and this will give you a way to begin to frame yourself. But you talked earlier about manufacturing these things, and I would tell you, I hope that the manufacturers don't take this NPRM and build their systems to it the way it's written right now. I hope that they wait a little bit and watch and see what the real rules are going to look like before they go spending all their resources in developing something that could be moot at the end of this review period.
So developing a cohesive and coherent set of expectations, maybe 5 of them, big bullets on a PowerPoint chart or something like that about what this really means would be a really important takeaway that you'd like to have people think about after watching this show. That is, what are the expectations, and not jump to conclusions and not assume that they can begin to operate or sell something immediately.
Sure.
And have a clear idea when they can.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of definition that still needs to go into this thing.
Amen. That's for sure.
Very, very quickly, I would say that if somebody wants to get into this technology on a non-commercial basis, because there are exceptions for commercial operators, but those are people that are very experienced in the industry, made the case to the FAA that they are experienced, can operate safely. I would say get involved with a RC model club and talk to them about the rules and where they fly and how they operate safely. And that's a way you can get started to learn how to be an operator, not trying to do it commercially, but just learning how to operate the aircraft, getting into the technology, and you can start that way. The other thing I would say is that these things are coming. I would learn about the technology because I think they're going to touch, so many industries. We just don't know what all the applications are just yet. And if you're in school, and you're a young person, you're naturally drawn to this kind of thing. If you're in the middle of your career, I think it would behoove you to begin understanding how this technology is going to impact your industry.
That's fantastic. And you said one word, exceptions, and that just struck a chord here. This NPRM is full of the concept of exceptions. They're establishing performance-based rules, but they're saying if you got a better idea, we'll give you an exception to work around that, which I thought, I just can't believe this is the same old FAA that gave us all our flying licenses years ago. This is just a different way to think. I'm way open-minded, and it's great in that regard, but there's risk in that regard.
There's risk with exceptions. There's always
got.
better to have rules than to operate with exceptions.
And my takeaway for folks who are on our show here is that please send us your cards and letters and let us know what kind of questions you have, and we'll bring continued stream of guests in on this show as the whole world of UAVs evolves, revolves, and devolves. And once again, thanks very much to Jay Fidel for having initiated this thought process about a year ago. It's been interesting, and we now actually have something on the table to go with. We have an NPRM to start working with. Well, thank you very much, folks. Thanks, Leonard. Thanks, Larry. And thanks our studio staff here for another wonderful Friday. Close the business on Friday, and let's go off and have a good weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Ted Ralston signing off from ThinkTech Hawaii in Honolulu.